and it's great to see everyone. So I'm just going to give a little presentation on brain aging and the NeuroAge test, and feel free to ask questions, pop questions in the chat. And this is really free flowing, and we want to get all your questions answered. So thanks for being here. So NeuroAge we're here at the company are aimed at helping people to slow down their brain aging, reverse their brain aging, in order to prevent dementia in the future. I'm a physician by training, also a neuroscientist, and a lot of the technology underlying the company is based on the last 20 years of my research out of MIT, and before that out of University of Pittsburgh School of Medicine. We have an expert team, including Persiana, who's here, and a few others. Our engineers are MIT trained, and we also have a full software development team. And really the goal of the company is to take older brains and help through lifestyle or through future therapeutics that the company is creating, as well as others, to take older brains and make them young again. And from a big picture, we think of ourselves a lot like Tesla. So Tesla is selling cars in order to gather data they need for better self-driving. And, we're providing value to customers, allowing them to track their brain aging and offering personalized recommendations with the ultimate goal of, in a privacy protected way, gathering data for better Alzheimer's therapeutics that can help people in the future that are personalized. And the reason that I started the company is my own family history of Alzheimer's. So these are my grandparents, and at the end of her life, my grandmother suffered with Alzheimer's disease, and my grandfather took care of her in the home. This had a really big impact on me as a child and led me to dedicate my life to coming up with better solutions for Alzheimer's disease. Now, unfortunately, it's in the next generation. My aunt is late stage with Alzheimer's. And I, in the course of starting NeuroAge, found out that I have a very common genetic risk factor for Alzheimer's disease myself. So I have one copy of the ApoE4 gene. About 20 to 25% of people have one copy, and 2% have two copies of ApoE4, which puts you at higher risk later in life in your to developing Alzheimer's disease. And the good news is that risk can be almost entirely mitigated through lifestyle. So there really is this huge actionable piece that people can do to stay cognitively sharp and at the end of their lives avoid having Alzheimer's and other forms of age-related neuro disorders. So we know that aging is the biggest risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. There's much like during COVID, we saw people are increased risk for COVID infection. With age, it's the same for Alzheimer's disease. So there's this exponential increase in risk past age 70. And if we live long enough, into our 90s and 100s, about 50% of people will develop Alzheimer's disease. So it's really a risk for everyone. And I think as we get better and better at treating other diseases, more and more people are going to be at risk for Alzheimer's. So there's a real need to help people with lifestyle early, to prevent and detect Alzheimer's early in order to be able to employ all of the things that we know to slow down or even reverse the course. So what do we know about aging? So we know that specific processes decline with age. So working and long-term memory decline with age, whereas other forms of cognition stay the same or even improve, like occupational or world knowledge. So that adage that you get wiser as you age is actually very true. And we also know that people have different rates of cognitive decline. So I'm showing you a figure from a paper here. Each of these graphs is a different type of cognition. So perceptual speed, working memory, word generation. That's what was that thing called again? And what you can see is that each of these lines is a person and they were tested over time. So some people show sort of a rapid decline in their ability to perform some of these cognitive tasks, whereas other people you can see don't decline at all or even improve over time. And so there's this really different speeds at which people are changing their cognition, and it's entirely possible to not lose your cognitive abilities at all as you age. Some of that is due to lucky genetics that folks have, but other pieces of it, nearly 40%, is due to lifestyle and other interventions. So what else do we know? We know that brains shrink with age. So this is the average of brains of 18 to 30-year-olds, all the way up to 61 to 70-year-olds. And you can see that as you age, there's a subtle but linear decrease in the volume of the brain. That's due to loss of neurons and loss of the connections between neurons. But again, if we looked at this on an individual basis, you'd see some people's brain shrinking and some people's remaining pretty steady and not decreasing in volume hardly at all. And we know in the context of neurodegenerative diseases that we see an even more severe version of this. So in severe Alzheimer's, for instance, you can see that the brain is even more shrunken than you see with normal aging. And the areas of the brain that shrink are what puts people at risk for certain diseases versus others. And what I've been studying for the last 20 years is what happens during normal brain aging that puts you at higher risk for these changes. So there's an increase in DNA damage, there's mitochondrial dysfunction, there's inflammation within glia. And underneath those changes are changes in the levels of RNA of genes in the brain that cause these hallmarks to occur. And this is important because this is part of what we're tracking in the blood test. So I'm just showing you two Alzheimer's genes in human brain, and each of these dots is a human. And less calbindin is associated with Alzheimer's and more GFAP is associated with Alzheimer's. And what you can see is that we're all being pushed towards Alzheimer's disease with age. But importantly, just like we saw the different rates with people's cognition, we also see different rates of loss or gain of levels of these genes with age. So this person is about a 70-year-old, and they have a calbindin level in their brain that's more like a 50-year-old. And we would expect that person to be protected from Alzheimer's disease in the future. And we can collapse all those changes down into a single score that we call NeuroAge. It's highly predictive of chronological age. So this has a p-value of less than 10 to the minus 12, very significant. So we can tell the biological age of the brain just based on the levels of these genes. And importantly, you know, who cares how old your brain is biologically if it doesn't relate to something that we all care about, which is function and disease risk. So we did the hard work. You can read about the science behind this if you want more details in my paper out of MIT. But we followed older adults for 15 years at the end of their lives and followed their memory and their health records. And then at the end, they agreed to donate their brains to science, and we got those brains. And what we showed is that people that were 5 years younger were 6 times less likely to have Alzheimer's in the future, even if they had genetic risk factors, those ApoE1 or 2 ApoE4 alleles. So what this told us is if you can slow down your brain aging as measured by our testing, you really have a way of delaying or even preventing Alzheimer's from occurring in the future. And that's really a new concept and a new way to think about this. So every year, most people will go to their doctor, they'll get some blood testing to check their cholesterol, glucose testing to check their risk of later diabetes, but no one is checking your brain aging right now for risk of Alzheimer's. So we created the NeuroAge test for brain aging in order to track your rate of brain aging and help people hit that magic number of -5 years. It's comprehensive diagnostic testing, includes a blood test for those RNA levels of genes. Separately, we give people a genetic score. genetic resilience, brain MRI, and then cognitive testing online with our NeuroGame software. And then we put that into a super predictor using AI. It's already been trained on more than 500,000 people and is continuously learning, and we can give people a brain aging score. So this is our avatar Max. Max is 55. He has a NeuroAge of 51. He's 41% less likely to have Alzheimer's in the future than the average person his same chronological age. No one would want this information unless there's something they can do about it. So we give people personalized lifestyle and health recommendations to slow down or even reverse their brain aging, come back and get retested and show that they've decreased their risk further. And then by participating in the NeuroAge test, you're helping us and others gather the data we need for better FDA-approved therapeutic drugs that are personalized to your biomarkers if lifestyle alone is not enough to decrease your risk. So how do you reverse your brain aging? So there's really 6 pillars: exercise, diet, sleep, community, and lowering stress. And the last one is staying mentally active. Those are the general recommendations. And then there's more specifics within those categories. There's also some evidence emerging for some supplements and dietary strategies people can take, including omega-3 supplementation, coffee and tea for the polyphenols, not for the actual caffeine. There is some emerging evidence that the GLP-1 RAs, so Ozempic, Wegovy, actually have benefits beyond just treating diabetes or helping with weight loss. There is good evidence for statins in people. And then there's some emerging evidence that's still on the horizon for a role for nicotine. It's in phase 2 trials and for hormone replacement therapy. There's also some newer Alzheimer's drugs that are being approved that that work much better in people earlier on in the course of disease. So if people do have a diagnosis of early Alzheimer's, there may be some clinical trials or therapies we can point people to that have just been approved. And then by participating in the Sunday surveys and other of this tracking, we can feed people back more personalized recommendations, saying things like people with biomarkers like yours are doing better with zone 2 cardio than weightlifting, for instance, or with this particular amount of fasting or with this particular diet. So the ultimate goal is to get very granular and give people really personalized recommendations for how to drop their NeuroAge. So people often ask me, is it really possible to reverse your brain aging? And I think the evidence is absolutely yes. So this was a study run by a friend of mine that showed that with just 25 extra minutes of exercise a week, people were able to increase their brain volume on MRI. So people are literally growing their brains back. This is an entrepreneur in Florida. He has 2 copies of the ApoE4 gene, so he's at much higher risk than the average person for developing Alzheimer's. And he was already testing positive in his brain for amyloid, which is a toxic protein that builds up that can kill neurons. And so he underwent drastic lifestyle improvements with diet and exercise, got retested, and was able to no longer test positive for those toxic proteins in his brain. And then lastly, there was this study from June of last year. T. Nornish is a celebrity doctor who has been studying Alzheimer's disease for a long time. And he combined a bunch of lifestyle interventions and supplements together and was able to show that people were able to reduce their Alzheimer's progression by 18% in early Alzheimer's, which is a little bit less than what we're seeing with the Alzheimer's therapeutics, but it's highly significant. Can show you a little bit for those of you that haven't taken a look at our demo yet. This is what the dashboard looks like. So This is just demo data for Max. And what you can see is that he's 54, but his NeuroAge is more like 51. And that's a combination of his NeuroGain results, the blood biomarkers, and the brain MRI. And then separately, we give this genetic resilience score. So we test for
Who are you talking about?
I think maybe not everyone's muted, or is that a question?
No, sorry, Christina. I didn't mute myself. I apologize.
Okay, that's fine. It's one of the clinicians we're working with. Nice to see you.
Thank
Um,
you. Same here.
so we have we tested for more than 40 variants. These are genetic risk factors for Alzheimer's. The basic 23andMe test, for example, only tests for one ApoE4. And it turns out that while ApoE4 is the biggest genetic risk factor, it's only about 30% of your risk. So there are people that have an ApoE4 allele that are at less risk than they think. There are people that don't have an ApoE4 allele that are at higher risk than they think. So this is really super accurate genetic testing. And then some of the genes that we test for, so we tell you what all of these are. So if you're, a biohacker and you want to go deep into what these different genes are, you can look them up. But some of them also inform the personalized recommendations that we give to people. So there's different strategies around for genetics. And then for the NeuroAge score, NeuroGames is there's 5 neuro games online. We didn't create these games. They're very clinically validated. They've been around for more than 50 years. We just made them a little bit more user-friendly and renamed them. But reaction time, this is how many pairs of words you can remember, how many numbers in a row, names and faces, which I know I'm concerned about my own ability to remember names and faces. So it's nice to be able to just check that out as well, and then focus. And then we give people results versus the average person that's taken the test and the average person of their same age and sex. And then combine those results into a single score that gives you an age just based on the cognitive testing. Separately, we give you a blood biomarker score. Those are the 52 RNA levels of genes, the genes in the brain that I was telling you about before. And we'll tell you on a molecular level how you're doing with your brain aging. And then lastly is the brain MRI piece. And so in addition to seeing brain volume, which I'll talk about in a second, we also screen for strokes, tumors, and aneurysms, so we can make sure that you don't have any of that going on. We also see things like mild white matter hyperintensities. These are quite common with age, but they're not benign. So they put you at higher risk for vascular dementia and stroke. And when we see these, we recommend that people take better care of their cardiovascular risk factors, including cholesterol, blood pressure, and other diabetes, other factors that can lead to this. These are partially reversible, so you can track them over time and see that you're improving them, or at least they're not getting worse as you get older. And then we're partnered with a Stanford spinout called BrainKey for the brain MRI portion. I think this is really one of the cooler parts of the test. So this is actually my brain. We give everyone a dashboard so you can see your brain in 3D. And then an age based on volume alone. So I'm reassured with my family history and my genetic risk that I'm 3 years younger. I'd like this to be 5 years younger by volume. So I'm working on my own lifestyle to try and decrease this number further, which is 5 years is the magic number for preventing Alzheimer's in the future, especially for people with genetic risk factors. And then we can also go region by region. So each of your brain regions tells you something a little different about your brain. And the region that I'm most interested in for me is the hippocampus because of my family history of Alzheimer's. This is the Alzheimer's brain region. how much volume you have here is a proxy for how many neurons you have there. So I'm reassured to know that I'm in the typical volume, which means I haven't lost too many neurons in my hippocampus, or it's normal for my age. We give people a really comprehensive report that goes along with this, talks about each of their brain regions, and then an explanation of what those brain regions do, and then these personalized lifestyle and health recommendations that go along with it. And as I mentioned before, we keep everyone general recommendations, but then we can give these personalized recommendations based on what we see with people's genetics and blood biomarkers and MRI report. So that is a little bit about what we do. If you want to know more about the validity of the neuro game, so this is word pairs that many people have taken. There are some slight sex differences in the game. So women are a little better than men at word pairs, men are better at reaction time. But you can see that even starting in your 20s or 30s, there's a decrease in the total number of word pairs. Now, a lot of people tell us this game is really hard. That is true. That's by design. So we can tell a 25-year-old from a 30-year-old. So the average person gets 17 out of 36 of these right. So about half of them right. So sort of need to adjust your expectations that if you miss many of them, that's normal. Keep going. And reaction time is the same thing. So it's been replicated across a bunch of different cohorts that you have a slowing of reaction time with age. And that's also related to lifestyle. So smoking status, diabetes, and other lifestyle variables. So how the NeuroAge test works is we send a kit to your house to do the saliva and the blood test. We schedule a brain MRI for you at a convenient location near your home. And then all the cognitive testing occurs online on NeuroGames. And the whole process takes about 6 weeks to complete from the time that you schedule your appointments. There really isn't another test like this out there. There are people that are doing pieces of what we're doing, Prenuvo with the whole body scans, 23andMe has genetics, CNS vital signs just the cognitive testing. They don't give you an age. And then there's overall biological aging companies like NeuroAge that are really reactive rather than proactive. And if you go to a traditional physician, not the longevity or concierge physicians that we're partnered with, they'll really wait for you to have a disease diagnosis to do anything about it. So if you go to see a neurologist and you don't have Alzheimer's disease, but you're just worried because you're forgetting more names and faces, there's really nothing they can do for you. They'll just turn you away at that. Yeah, so I think I'll stop there and just see if there are any questions from the audience. Any questions? What do you guys think about the test? Feel free to just jump in.
Hi, everyone. It's Norma from Northwest Indiana ER and Hospital. I think it's interesting. I feel like there is a need for this. So you guys have already partnered with our sister hospital, Oklahoma ER.
Yeah.
So as far as like how many patients they've received, how many patients have they seen already for this? Do you know how many they've already done?
Yeah, so we've just gotten started. I think it's 2 so far.
Oh, good. Okay. Perfect. Okay. That's good to know. Yeah.
Nice to see you, Norma.
Thank you.
All right.
Hi, Kristen.
Hi, Joe.
How you doing? Thank you for the presentation. I'm sure you're getting all sorts of questions about this now because of the Eric Topol Substack. How does the PTAW 217 compare to your RNA gene expression blood test? And I just how do they compare?
Yeah, so there's been a new Alzheimer's blood test that is, I do not believe it's commercially available yet, but it's in the research um, arm. So it does appear to be tracking with Alzheimer's risk much earlier than the amyloid testing or the other tau testing. So brain aging and amyloid and tau are really separate buckets of risk from my research. And so combining them both together creates an even better predictor. So we would love to have p-tau 217 as an additional test that we run. I think that's a future direction, but we're able to test brain aging even in people's 20s. So that really is starting to tell you your risk much earlier than anything else. So p-tau 217, I believe, was 20 years ahead of time. They were able to
Yeah, about 20.
risk. Yeah.
Their
So
accuracy of predicting when you're going to get it was scary good. So I mean,
right.
if it were available commercially, I'm not sure I would get it. And I'm pretty sure it's close to becoming available commercially. I saw something about $200. I don't know whether he mentioned whether you could actually get it right now or not.
Oh, I haven't read Eric's Substack yet. I should take a look at that. But I did see the original research article that came out about that. Um, yeah, I mean, I think I would want to know. I'd like to get all of them really, amyloid tau and NFL and the various taus, and just track it over time because I think it's scary good in predicting who will get it, but you can also alter that course,
Yep. Yeah.
right? So there's things you can do about it.
Yeah, they said the exercise can lower it. So still, yeah, it's almost like getting GrimAge, the epigenetic test, where you can alter that too, but it's supposed to be pretty good at predicting when you're going to die. So, but you would think it would be a good thing to add, and would be additive to your blood tests.
I do think so. Yeah. I think that we would have to check that out. So that would be a research question, but that is my prediction because we see that with amyloid and tau pathology in the brain that it's additive. So I would imagine the blood test would be the same.
Thank you.
Great. So, Stephen Hubbard, how do the cognitive games compare to cognitive tests given to people in clinics? Really well. So the publication, so like I said, we didn't create these games. We hope to create games that are maybe more fun and engaging, kind of more Wordle-like, but we would need to validate them. So right now, the games that we have are really cognitive tests that have been around for years and years. And they're also in UK Biobank, which is this big 500,000 person sample out of the UK. So the UK with their nationalized healthcare system has a really nice data set that they're collecting on this cognitive testing over time. And they compared in some of their subjects paper and pen tests to these tests online. And they're pretty much have the same results, whether you do them online or whether you do them on paper and pencil. So there's really a lot of validity to them, which is why we started with these particular set of tests. And also I should just point out that there was a study that I put on LinkedIn on just a really small 12-person study on psilocybin and Parkinson's. And so it looks like there's some cognitive improvement in people that have psychotherapy plus psilocybin in this 12-person study that came out this week. Really preliminary evidence, but still pretty exciting. And one of the tests they use is PALS, like paired associated learning, and that is the same as our word pairs test. So this is the testing that's commonly used in research studies to show differences between interventions. Alan Brody says, this is fun. When I try the reaction time on my phone, the red dot doesn't respond sometimes. Sorry to hear that, but thanks for telling us about that. Alan, we will mention that to the development team and see if we can reproduce that error. Do you know how long ago you tried it? You just want to comment? Is that recently?
I'm sorry, what was that?
How long ago did you try the reaction time game? Was that recently?
Oh, last night.
Last night. Okay. And
Yeah.
it wasn't responding on your phone when you
Yeah, sometimes the bubble would come up and I'd push it and nothing would happen. So
Okay. Thanks for letting us know. What kind of phone do you have, just so we can tell
an
them?
iPhone. What's the 16?
Okay. I will let our software developers know about that. In general, it's probably better to play the games on a desktop or laptop.
Okay, yeah, makes
They
sense.
do work on the phone, but
Yeah.
yeah, we'll let them know about that. Thanks for
Anyway, yeah, just yeah. Okay, cool. Thanks.
putting.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, the games are fun.
Great.
I'm getting better
Yeah.
at it. Something's working.
Is there anything else you would like from the game experience? We're always interested to hear people's feedback.
So I'm reading a book on memory to improve
Mhm.
memory. And so it's a way for me to test it out on the app. So it's Harry Lorraine. I don't know if you've read Harry Lorraine's book on memory.
No. What things are you testing? What are you trying?
Numbers, word association, names, faces.
Yeah, and what in the book you're reading are they recommending that you do to improve?
Oh, they have different systems. So one's a PEG system. Usually it's an association. I think the brain is good with images rather
Mhm.
than letters. So if you have, if you look at association with words, you would, try to make a ridiculous looking thing out of the two words. And then when you come back to it, your brain's more likely to remember whatever you thought of rather than the word itself. And then that triggers the word.
Yeah,
So,
that's definitely true. And there are little tricks for both names and faces and for the word pairs game.
uh-huh.
And a lot of that is to do with exactly like you're saying. So, if you have like river and pants in the word pairs, imagining your pants getting wet in a river and, things like
Yeah.
that. So a little story and doing a little visualization.
Yes. So I had a question about that actually, Kristen.
Yep.
Are the tests normed for people? You can do the test and not do that actively, or you can do that actively. And I, typically you'll do better. At least I have. If I've, is it as valid a predictor if you're using those? They're not tricks per se, but they are. If the people that were doing the test originally weren't doing things like that, then it probably is going to be a little different.
Yeah, it definitely adds noise. It's why the cognitive testing is it's the least predictive of all the tests we run. And part of it is that there is this, some people are gonna know about those tricks and use them, and some people will not have read books or study techniques to know about using these little tricks. I will say that being able to improve on the games is a feature and not a bug. So there have been a lot of studies that have looked at improvement in test scores over time. And those are also predictive of your brain aging and your ability to avoid dementia in the future. So even though people can improve, or that's not necessarily means that the test isn't valid.
You're
So
saying practice effect is a good thing? or
Yes,
predictive?
this effect. In some, yeah, it's indicative of your, cognitive ability at that time, or lack of cognitive decline, I should say, because it's not really ability. Yeah. So, but that's another reason people also have different baseline abilities. So, if you imagine, I don't know, if you're a world-class ping pong player, you probably have a baseline really fast reaction speed. And so if we test that world-class ping pong player in old age, they'd probably still have a reaction speed of the average person who's young. And that's because their baseline is different. So it's really good to test these games over time. So you're playing against yourself, rather than playing against the average, because there are differences in people's baselines.
That's a great point.
Yeah. Cool. Is there any other, are there interventions people are wondering about? Supplements or anything else that we should chat about? Burning questions.
Is Matt doing anything with the games and rapamycin with the Optispan people?
So they're very interested in using these neuro games for some interventions. I think they have some new things on the horizon. We were actually just chatting this morning. This is Matt Caberlin for people on the call who runs a clinic called Optispan in Seattle. And they're looking at, I think they're going to start looking at TPE, which is therapeutic plasma exchange, as well as rapamycin.
With Eric Verdin and Dobry Kiprov?
I'm not sure if those might be two separate initiatives. I'm not
really?
sure. Yeah. Yeah. But there's some emerging evidence for that. And then on the way over here, I was looking into nicotine. So Peter Attia had a new episode on nicotine and longevity. I only got partway through it, but it's pretty interesting on pros and cons of that.
Yeah, that's on my list to listen to. They're long though, so.
Yeah. Yes.
And are there any good studies on HRT and these neuro games, or any of your blood or brain markers?
Yeah, so we're just starting to gather that information. So I think we know that HRT is good in women for dementia prevention in general, but their effect on these actual games, I think we're going to need to gather that data this year. But that would be really exciting to publish a study on that. Yeah. Okay. Are there any last questions? Otherwise, I think we can wrap up. Great. Well, thank everyone so much for coming. Appreciate you being here, and you can always follow up with us as well. So this is my email. Feel free to email me. And appreciate you taking the time.